want to talk a little bit about how and mainly when we should cycle out of our Bitcoin positions. Now, I've been in the Bitcoin space for almost a decade, so I have watched a huge rally on Bitcoin, about a 35x since I got into Bitcoin. Today, Bitcoin's trading at about $105,000 in anticipation of the upcoming inauguration of President Donald Trump. We'll talk about that a little bit, but the main thing I want to talk about is what do we do with our Bitcoin? Because a lot of times what we end up doing is we buy a ton of Bitcoin and we're like, oh, what now? And that's not really a bad thing because it sets you up with a long-term perspective, but I want to talk about when and how to cycle out of Bitcoin. And I also want to talk about where I think it's going this cycle and where it's going in future cycles. So let's start with the price predictions and the reasoning behind them. You see, on January the 20th, President Donald Trump is going to be elected for his second term, inaugurated into his second term. And in his second term in office, he's made a lot of promises about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. The thing you have to remember is that the current Biden administration has been very anti-Bitcoin, extremely anti-cryptocurrency. This is the same administration where we've seen pretty much the totality of the XRP lawsuit. Now, it did start under Trump, but it was definitely exacerbated under Gary Gensler's leadership and under the Biden administration. We've also seen a lot of just general anti-cryptocurrency sentiment coming out of this administration, which is possibly and probably part of the reason that Kamala Harris lost the election was because people very much, the electorate in the United States very much believed that Trump was going to be better for cryptocurrency. So the right got the crypto vote in this election. So it was a big part of the swing vote because the cryptocurrency block, it can go left or right. There's a lot of people in the cryptocurrency community that are very left leaning, but in general the cryptocurrency block leaned right this time, at least on the cryptocurrency issue, because Trump seemed to be far better for cryptocurrency than Kamala or Biden ever were or would be. And so with January 20th coming up and with Trump coming in, we've got a lot of promises of different things that are going to happen and a lot of rumors of things that might happen after the election, after the inauguration of. The first thing, obviously, is the strategic Bitcoin reserve. We don't know whether he's going to try and do that by executive order or whether that's going to be something that will be done through Congress, but we are pretty confident at this point that that's going to happen. It's been promised, and we certainly hope that that promise will come true. I think it will, because if Trump doesn't do good on that promise, the chances of him getting J.D. Vance in as his successor are slim, because again, the electorate that got Trump in office, a lot of that swing vote was voting for him because of his promises around Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. He swooped in, the left dropped the ball on that, picked that up, and is using it to kind of push forward. So if he wants to have J.D. Vance slide in there in 2028 and continue what he's going to be starting in 2025, then he's going to need to actually make good on those promises. And I think he will, especially with a red Congress. I think he'll be able to get that strategic Bitcoin reserve online. Some people are going to be upset when they realize it's probably not going to happen day one by executive order, although it might, and it is possible. But there is a very high possibility that it'll actually be done through Congress, which means it could take a little bit more time. There are other things that are currently promised, and there are other rumors that could be helping Bitcoin along on its price prediction as we work through our topic here. And one of the big things is the idea of the External Revenue Service. Now, Trump has already promised that he's going to do his best to create the External Revenue Service. Now, for a new agency to be created, that has to go through Congress. But again, he has a red House and a red Senate, so he'll probably be able to get it done. The External Revenue Service he's proposing will hopefully lower the income tax on Americans, or even potentially eradicate the IRS all entirely, which is kind of the rumor side of things. By enacting a 10% tariff on everybody, 20% tariff on the United States and on Canada, to punish them for drugs coming across the border and illegal immigration and such, until there's a balance in the trade, until there's fair trade with those two strategic partners, and then a 60% tariff on anything coming from China. This will likely raise a lot of revenue, probably not enough to replace the $4.5 trillion a year that the United States federal government generates from income tax. So whether or not the ERS, the External Revenue Service, is going to be able to replace the IRS is uncertain, but I would also say it is unlikely. It's probably not going to replace the IRS, so that's one rumor floating around that's probably not going to happen. Like it or not, Trump is probably not going to be able to get rid of the IRS because the government is just so large that they're not going to be able to fund even 25% of what the government spends money on, if not for the IRS levying taxes on the American people. So the IRS is probably not going anywhere, but hopefully the ERS will actually be created, which would theoretically, we'll see how it plays out, lighten the burden on the American people. Now, there is a possibility that the tariffs just kick the prices down to the American people and it just drives inflation, in which case Trump would shoot himself in the foot. Hopefully he's smart enough not to set it up in a way that it would just lead to massive amounts of inflation, because he would undermine his entire campaign if he were to do that. Now, another rumor that's floating around is that in the new administration there may not be any capital gains taxes levied on U.S.-based cryptocurrencies. This would be a very big development if it is to occur. So we'll stay tuned on that. These are different kinds of rumors and facts that are that we're going to see whether they come to fruition or not. But if these things do happen in general, they're going to be very bullish for Bitcoin, which kicks our price predictions for this cycle and for the rest of the history of Bitcoin way up. Now, this cycle, I'm expecting Bitcoin's going to go to between $200,000 and $300,000. As the cycle goes on, my predictions go up because the bullishness around Bitcoin just continues to increase. So I'm looking at the end of this cycle probably around $250,000 per coin. And when we see that around $250,000 per coin, then we're probably going to end up seeing the top happen sometime at the end of 25, maybe even moving on into 2026. It is very possible that this cycle lasts longer than the previous cycles, simply because the amount of mass adoption going on. It means that less selling will happen in the bear market. It also means that people will be less likely to sell their Bitcoin for short-term gain, which we'll talk about in a second, rather than just holding it for the ultra long term. This means that the bear market will likely be shorter and not as deep as previous bear markets because of the amount of mass adoption and purchasing of Bitcoin that is no longer dependent upon the cycle, but is instead dependent simply upon the principles of Bitcoin and is held for the very long term. Entities like the United States government, El Salvador, MicroStrategy, and many other banks that are now buying Bitcoin, they're not necessarily buying Bitcoin based on the cycle anymore. They're kind of just buying Bitcoin whenever they can get their grubby little paws on it, which means that Bitcoin theoretically doesn't have as big of a bear market ahead of it as it has in the past. We've seen that happen. The first bear market was 87% deep. The second one was 85% deep. The third one, which concluded in 2022, was only 77% deep. So it gives us confidence that there is a possibility that this cycle is not going to be as deep as previous bear market cycles. Now, where is Bitcoin going to go in the long run? By the end of 2040, I anticipate that Bitcoin will be trading between $3.5 to $5 million because of the enormous amount of growth that is going on the blockchain right now, as far as the adoption thereof. If the current trends that we've seen happen over the last 5 years continue and extrapolate for another 15 years, we should be seeing Bitcoin trading in the tens of trillions of dollars of market capitalization, potentially even reaching up to $100 trillion market capitalization in 2024 dollars. Now, understand that that's accounting for inflation, so that might be $25 to $30 trillion market capitalization with our current prices. But when you consider that that's only about a 10x from where we are today in today's dollars, it makes a lot of sense that Bitcoin could 10x in the next 15 years, considering in the last 7.5 years that I've been here, I've watched it 35x. So a $3.5 to a $5 million Bitcoin is extremely reasonable, even though some people are going to say I'm insane for that. And it is also a price target that gives us some of the answers that we need for this conversation that I'm about to have with you about how to sell our Bitcoin. Eventually, you're going to sell your Bitcoin for something. Either you're going to die and it's going to be transferred to your, I guess you could say it was sold, you paid with your life, right? You died, so you transfer it to your heirs. You're going to end up losing it, which hopefully you don't, but it could happen. Or, and here's the other conclusion, you're going to sell it for cash. You could sell it for cash, and then what you're going to do with that cash, God only knows. But the main thing that I think we're going to end up doing with our Bitcoin is not so much liquidating it into dollars. I think we're going to more so pay for things with it. We're going to say, hey, I'm holding this till retirement, and I'm going to spend some of it for retirement. Hey, let's say you're 17 right now, just getting into Bitcoin. In 10, 15 years, maybe you're married and you want to buy your first house, and your Bitcoin has grown by 15x. So you might sell some of your Bitcoin at that point in time for that. And so I really want you to consider one thing. This is the whole point in a nutshell. After being here for almost a decade, this is one of the most important pieces of advice I can give you as the metaphorical old guy in the space. And that is, make sure when you're planning on liquidating your Bitcoin, or if you haven't even acquired any yet, make sure to take a long-term perspective before you take a short-term perspective. Think long-term and then fill in the blanks on the short-term. What do I mean by that? Well, when you are married, you had better take a long-term perspective and say, I'm never cheating on my wife. I'm not doing that. Not doing that, because I want in 50 years for her to trust me even more than she does today. How dare you ever look at another woman if you're married? How dare you if you ever look at another man if you're married and you're a woman? How dare you? Why would you, first of all, entertain some such horrible notion of looking at another individual than your spouse? And even more so, how dare you act on it, right? Why would you do that? You're trading an entire lifetime of happiness and joy with your spouse for some short-term, I wouldn't call it pleasure. It's disgusting. Why would you do that? And so that's kind of what we do with with our finances. We're almost adulterous with them. We sacrifice our long-term for our short-term. We're so convinced that I've got to have what I want. I got to have what some warped version of pleasure is in our mind right now at the expense of the long-term. You need to start with the end in mind and work backwards. Start off by saying, how much Bitcoin am I going to hold? How much Bitcoin can I hold for the very long term? 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Then, only then, decide, am I going to sell some Bitcoin this cycle? But ask the question in that order. How much am I going to hold for the ultra long term? And how much of it am I going to sell this cycle? If you've not acquired Bitcoin at all, then I would highly consider you reevaluate your choices, because I think you're making a mistake. Oh, well, Jeff, it's at 105,000. Yeah, well, I remember when Bitcoin first hit $10,000. When it first hit $20,000, I was thinking, man, it's too high to buy. Now it's 5 and 10 times higher than it was then. And Bitcoin is likely going to do the exact same thing, albeit with slightly lower returns, but still massively higher returns than anything you're going to find in the stock market or real estate. It's the best investment on the market right now and will be for the foreseeable future. So why are you not considering whether you should be in this or not? Don't just consider that it's got a high risk, because some people are saying, oh, but altcoins, Jeff. Oh, I understand altcoins. We hold altcoins. Bitcoin has the lowest risk and the highest reward. It's got the best risk to reward ratio of any investment on planet Earth right now. That's why everybody's buying it. So quit thinking you're smarter than everybody else, because you're not. Neither am I. Start investing in Bitcoin. That's my counsel. Now, I'm not a financial advisor. You need to make your own decisions. I'm not forcing you to buy it, and I'm not telling you that you have to. I am, however, saying that you need to consider it if you're not. And you also need to consider not first, how do I sell Bitcoin at the top of this cycle, but how much Bitcoin can I possibly hold for the long term, and then sell as little as you can at the top of this cycle. None at all if you can help it. We plan on selling absolutely none of our Bitcoin at the top of this cycle. In fact, we will be continuing to dollar cost average every single day, no matter what, because we believe in the longevity of Bitcoin, and because we have provided enough cushion in our finances that I don't need to liquidate the Bitcoin, and so therefore I am not going to. If you're going to liquidate Bitcoin this cycle, I would highly encourage you to follow one principle. Simply ask yourself, does the future of this cycle look brighter than the past of this cycle? Right now, when you look at the cycle, the next 6 to 12 months look way better than the last 6 to 12 months. You see where I'm going with this? The next 6 to 12 months sound way better than the last 6 to 12 months. Now, in a year, that may be different. It may start to feel like the best is in the past. And when that feeling starts to come in based on thorough research and understanding of the market, not FOMO and not FUD, you don't want to go too far in either direction, but when you actually have a clear perspective on whether the best is in the future or in the past, that's when you would consider, okay, now it might be time in this cycle to begin liquidating some. And I would highly recommend to keep the liquidation of Bitcoin in particular as low as you possibly can, and hold as much of it as you can for the ultra long term. I put a cut in there. Hope you enjoyed today's video. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and sign up for Blowfin with the link in the description box down below. There is a $200,000 prize pool going on right now that you can get access to based on your trading volume. So sign up down below, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.